A young man from Ireland, from Limerick, Ireland, shared with me, with Greg and I one day at a table, and he said, I was a very violent man, my late teens and early 20s. And he said, I was so violent that I would fight in the streets. And my enemies and I would break into each other's homes and attack each other. And he said, I would sleep or sit on the edge of my bed with an axe in my hand at night, waiting for my enemy to show up at the door to attack me or my family. And one day he was walking down the street, and an older man just walked by him. And as he walked by, he stretched out his hand and shook his hand and said, God bless you, my son. And he said, I had never been touched like that in my whole life. He said he had a good, strong, firm handshake, but there was something in the touch of this man's hand, touching my hand. And he said, I was so struck by this, I followed him down the street. And when we got to the corner, when he turned to the next corner, I snuck around and I followed him down the next corner. And then I followed him to the next corner to see where he was going. And he was so touched by this man's tenderness, just something he'd never seen. He'd never felt it before. The next day, he would pass by on the street because he saw that this man came home the same way every day. So the next day he was on the street and this man reached out again, shook his hand, said, God bless you, my son. This man did this with this young man for a full week. And then on the 6th or 7th day, I believe it was, he said, he shook my hand and held it this time and said, son, Jesus Christ died for you, that your sin might be forgiven. He said, go home and talk to him and ask him to come into your life and ask him for the new life that he offers you. So he went home and he said, I was Catholic. He said, so I prayed the rosary first. And he says, now once I was through with that part, he said, I put all that away. And he said, Jesus, whoever you are, that man told me that if I would talk to you, you would come into my life and forgive my sin and you would change my life. And he said, Pastor, I can't explain to you what happened to me in that room. He said, the glory of God came into that room. And he said, something happened to me and I was so shaken and so changed in a moment of time. He said, a few days later, I ran out of my house. I went to the door of my biggest enemy in all of Limerick, Ireland. He said, these people were so violent, their house was painted black and their windows were boarded up. They just lived to drink and fight. He said, I knocked on the door. They opened the door and they looked at me and he said they were rugged, rough, full of scars, a lot of them holding weapons either in their hands or nearby. And he said, I have something to say to you. And they said, come in. And he stood in the middle of the living room and they either prepared to be attacked or to attack him. And he said, Jesus Christ has come into my life, forgiven my sins, and he's given me a new heart, a new hope. Folks, he said 3 people in that room that day, 3 people gave their lives to Jesus Christ.